like the left and the right both have problems, both have issues. There's no doubt. What we cannot pretend is like their problems are equal.
The left now, today, doesn't have, and maybe they never have, but they certainly don't now, they don't have a framework by which to have a rational disagreement anymore. Like they'll use a Christian framework against Christians, but then when you try to dig into, well, what's their framework, they don't have anything objective.
And most of these issues that they want us to stay out of and that Christians want us to stay out of are moral issues, cultural issues, more so than they are even policy issues, right?
I kind of cringe at that because I'm like, man, this is so opposite to what mainstream Christianity has been preaching for the last 15 years.
I don't think there's anything more cringe right now in American church than when you see the pastor who is trying to play it safe in the middle still and trying to equivocate, quote unquote, both sides.
I think that's a great point. I think the one, as a pastor, the one thing I want to always kind of give people is...
Very true. And to that point, welcome back to Leadership on Purpose. I mentioned in the last episode that there is going to be a major shift in the show and in the content that you're going to see from me. And that shift is that ever since the Charlie Kirk martyrdom, I am not holding back on my content anymore. It's not going to be filtered for what is acceptable for corporate consumption. It's going to be what I feel convicted and called to speak on when it comes to truth. And the focus of this show is going to be still on equipping leaders, but it's going to be on equipping leaders to lead with clarity and with courage. So, if you've listened to the show, the mantra has been lead with confidence and humility. Those are incredible traits for leadership. In this moment, that mantra no longer fits for me. The mantra that and the desire, the goal for me is I want to equip people to lead and Christians to lead with clarity. That means clarity on what is truth. How do we stand for it? How do we defend it? What are the best attacks the world has against us? And how do we actually, again, hold to that truth and do it in a way that's winsome? And then courage, lead with courage, which is very different than confidence, actually. And I believe that God in this moment is calling all of us to courage. So that's what we're focused on. I am joined by two really good friends today, Timmy Bauer, Kenny Ortiz. Timmy is an entrepreneur friend who is an incredible children's book author, artist, and publisher. My kid's book, if you've heard of it, I Want to Be a Leader When I Grow Up, was all due to Timmy. And Kenny Ortiz is a really good friend. I call him Kenny O, and he's an incredible pastor. He has a booming church plant here in the greater Orlando area that is now 1 year in. And he just has incredible thoughts that I want to be able to jam on with you guys. So I'm welcome to the show, guys. I want to start off with a clip that we're gonna listen to. It's from Josh Howerton. Josh Howerton has been on fire lately and has been made for this cultural moment that we're in. So I'm going to share screen here and I'm going to share this clip. I'm going to pause it about halfway through. Want to get your reactions to this because I think this will set the stage for our conversation today.
Literally any pastor in America knows what I'm about to say is true. They just have not grappled with the reality and the implications of what I'm about to say. If you want the advancement of the gospel and the growth of the church to get significantly smothered in your state or your city, here's all you got to do. Let it go blue. That's simply what data shows. I'll say it like this. Show me a map of the most progressive areas in our nation. Then show me a map of the areas in our nation that have the fewest churches. It's the same map. So my point is that the advancement of generally and correctly defined political conservatism, it is a significant and powerful force for pre-evangelism because it installs a plausibility structure in the populace that leads to intuitively understanding Christianity is true, right, and good. So I would say in order to accomplish the Great Commission, we need to advocate for it at the political level. And I know this sounds like super weird and even cringe for like my seeker-sensitive megachurch pastor world. That's the world I came from, and I have a lot of affinity for that world.
Okay, pausing it there. Reactions to this so far.
Go ahead, Kenny.
I mean, the two maps image, I think, is just perfect, to be honest. Like, because you can't, no one who's rational, it can deny that. The Venn diagram between secular progressive culture in America and hostile to Christianity, that Venn diagram is a circle. I mean, it like the way it's perfect. I'm just like, so anyway, he's 100% right. We could disagree on how to maybe grapple with that, engage with that, what caused that. I think those are fair conversations, but you cannot deny the fact of where we are today.
Yeah. Where my brain went when he was talking about like pre-event, essentially it lays the groundwork for pre-event, like advancing the generally recognized conservative value system is basically pre-evangelism. So first of all, I kind of cringe at that because I'm like, man, this is so opposite to what mainstream Christianity has been preaching for the last 15 years. And it's hard for me to be like, yeah, let's go, because it feels like there's no more saying, hey, both sides need to it's like that moment's gone, it feels like. But the thing that where my brain went when he was saying like laying the groundwork or laying the framework, and I don't know if this is necessarily related to his point, but the left now today doesn't have, and maybe they never have, but they certainly don't now. They don't have a framework by which to have a rational disagreement anymore.
Proof.
There's not a base framework of we believe in objective truth and the goal is to find objective truth. That's gone. So what they have is a totally utilitarian approach to arguing, where it's just they're just going to use whatever's available to them. So they'll try to use our framework against us to the best that they can. Like they'll use a Christian framework against Christians. But then when you try to dig into, well, what's their framework, they don't have anything objective. So what it feels like now is it's a battle between a group that believes in objective truth and argues about how to find it, and a group that doesn't believe in objective truth. And I don't know what they believe in. Like, it's very hard to define what they even believe in other than just that they are against objective truth and fundamental reality.
Well, I think what's so compelling about this too is that it's empirical. It's an empirical view of the way this has transpired across the country, right? So as you said, it feels kind of cringe. It does. And he's going to say that. He's going to explain that when we keep playing the clip. But it feels kind of cringe to kind of say these things out loud because of the way we've been thinking for so long in modern Christianity, which is, oh, those things are political. That means that Christians are we're not really supposed to, maybe we're supposed to vote. Like most Christians would say, we're supposed to vote. It's okay to be somewhat politically active, but it's not really our place to get vocal there. It's not really our place to weigh into these political issues. And what's happened is what we've seen, the more that we've ceded on that, the more that we've abdicated when it comes to these quote unquote political, which by the way, when people are saying that, most of these issues that they want us to stay out of and that Christians want us to stay out of are moral issues, cultural issues, more so than they are even policy issues, right? But we've ceded so much and we've seen the empirical effects of that. You like we can't argue with the maps or with that same Venn diagram. The other thing I think a lot of us have seen, we've seen it anecdotally too. So what he's talking about with like this like the pre-evangelism, how many people do you know anecdotally? I know several personally, but also some more famous characters too, who have been red-pilled first by conservative truth, right? But then that is the gateway drug to the ultimate truth, the ultimate reality, which is it ends with Christ. So it starts with, hey, I see the world's gone so crazy. It's gone so clown world. I see the guy up there with junk in his pants standing next to the woman and acting like he beat her in a swim race and that he should deserve to be. That's where it started, right? And then most people are like, whoa, okay. This whole like no objective truth thing, like I'm craving reality again. I'm craving truth. It starts with that. So much of it has started with those sort of things. And then it leads to, okay, well, where's the ultimate truth? Where is that? And it's very powerful. We see it empirically. We see it anecdotally. And I think like we can debate like the theology behind what's the right Christian engagement, like the right way to do this when it comes to culture. But to say that we shouldn't be engaging on quote unquote politics is wrong. It's wrong.
I think kind of another way to say what Howerton's saying, what you're like, is like the left and the right both have problems, both have issues. There's no doubt. But what we cannot pretend is like their problems are equal. I think that's the issue. Like if you go back 70 years ago, maybe you could go, okay, the left and the right are both equally wrong. They're both equally immoral. We need to be prophetic to both of these. And Christians have always been called to be prophetic to those who are in leadership. That's my job as a pastor, is to look at leaders in our community, in our nation, and to call them to account, to call them to obey God's moral law. That's what pastors and leaders are always called to do. If you go back in time, though, at some point in American history, you could be equally prophetic to both sides because they were both equally wrong, different, but kind of congruent in some ways. That's not the case today. Like, the left and the right are both broken, absolutely, but the left is more broken, and it's not by a small margin either. It's not 51-49. It's a significant margin. And so my friends want to be like, well, Trump is bad too, and the right wing does flawed things. Yes, absolutely. And I'm going to rebuke that too. But let's not pretend like somehow they are both on a scale of 10, they're both a 9, when they're not even close. It's absurd. Talking about it in that regard simply doesn't reflect reality.
Yeah.
Something that you said, Kenny, that gets to one of the things that I texted Blake when he asked me his questions, is something that I don't know that I'm hearing anybody talk about. Maybe somebody's talking about it and I'm just not seeing it. But the idea that Christians are supposed to be prophetic to leaders and governors is something that we believe, or we ought to believe. But in the American system, everyone is to some degree a leader and a governor. We live in a representative democracy, or a representative Republican system of democratic republic, where everyone has power that they've been born into. And it really frustrates me when Christians, especially pastors, speak to us as if we are the same group of people that Paul was speaking to when he said, submit to your governing authorities. And that's not to say that we're not to submit to our governing authorities. We have that, that same thing that Paul said we are to do. We are to submit to our governing authorities. The difference is, in America, to some degree, every believing citizen is a governing authority, in the sense that we have been given political power. And how would Paul have written to governing authorities that were believers? He would have written them maybe slightly differently. At the very least, don't we need to take into account both sides of that passage that he's talking about? Because in the passage, he's talking about how we need to submit to governing authorities. And then in that same passage, he talks about God's design for governing authorities, that they're not to wield the sword in vain, but are to use it to create fear for the evildoer.
That's right.
And I've never heard any pastor explicitly say, you believing citizens of the U.S. with the governing authority that you've been born into are to step into God's role for government and not wield the sword in vain, but use it to create fear for the evildoer.
Come on. Amen. Retweet.
It's a unique, what you're hitting on, Timmy, is we have been gifted it is such a gift. This country, this nation is a gift from God. It is a gift from God. Unlike any other nation, the founding of it.
And a huge responsibility that Christians, for the last 15 years, that pastors, in my opinion, have been leading their congregations to abdicate.
And that's what I would say, is it was a gift, a beautiful gift. People don't like to remember this, or don't like to acknowledge this. 98% of the people in this country, when it was founded, 98% were Christian. And when you say that today, it's oh, yeah, that kind of makes sense. But what does that mean? This was a truly uniquely Christian nation that was a massive experiment in history, a massive experience to set up a nation in this way, with this type of representative democratic republic, as you said, that was unheard of. But also to be founded unabashedly on Christian principles and values. And then a nation and a populace that was so Christian. We all know that John Adams quote where the founders have acknowledged that this system of government really only works if the populace is religious and Christian. Otherwise, it starts to implode. And that's what we're seeing. Is so I think our heart as Christians, just so I'm very clear on this, our heart is not to use political power as the vehicle, the primary vehicle, at least, toward advancing the gospel. That is not, that's backwards, actually. The primary way to advance the gospel is to preach the gospel and live it out. That's the primary. That's what. And to make disciples. Like, what does it mean to make disciples? You don't primarily make disciples by way of political power. I think we're agreed on that in terms of the other side of Christianity that wants to totally abdicate here. I agree with that. That's not the way we make disciples. But for us to abdicate when it comes to these quote unquote political issues is a massive, massive failure, and it's a misstewarding of what we were gifted with this nation. And I'll say to your point too, Kenny. I don't think there's anything more cringe right now in church, in American church, than when you see the pastor who is trying to play it safe in the middle still and trying to equivocate, quote unquote, both sides. Well, this side's crazy and this side's crazy, and we don't ascribe to that. It's like those days are over. They were cringe before. They're even more cringe now if you're still trying to walk that tightrope and play it safe. It doesn't mean you should be partisan. Like, I don't think we should have any allegiance to the Republican Party if they don't have allegiance to Christ. I think we only support candidates and parties, if you will, that are the best option in what we feel like Christians are called to do. But we should be unabashedly anti-Democratic Party. I could say that out loud. I think pastors should be able to say that out loud because of what's in their party platform, because of the things that they stand for, codified in their party platform, but also in the way that they live it out with their agenda. If you're not willing to make that stand as a pastor today, then I don't believe that you really should be a pastor. You can be a communicator if you want, but to be a pastor, people are looking for like where their pastor is falling on these issues, and to abdicate there or to try to stay out of it, I think is
What's a core tenet of the Democratic Party that you think disqualifies them from Christian support?
Sanctity of life. Sanctity of life, number one. Sexuality, gender, marriage, feminism, redistribution of wealth. We could go on and on and on. Like
Marxism,
Marxist ideology,
dividing us on race, making people's identity about race and victimhood. Those are all, I think, opposed to what.
Is there a core tenet of the Republican Party that you think disqualifies them from Christian support?
It's a great question.
I would say that there are abuses that Christians need to be loud about, but I'm not sure that there's a core tenet of the party that Christians are to be like, oh, okay, I can't be a part of this movement because of this core tenet.
Right. I think the way it's like, when I look at the parties, I look at their policies. The Democratic Party policies make it impossible for me to ever vote for anyone who associates with that. On the Republican side, I go, the policies don't eliminate any Republican, but there are individual Republicans that eliminate themselves. 100%. And I go, I can't vote for that guy because of the way he lives or the way he believes, the way he functions. So there are individual Republicans that I would never support and would say no one should get behind that guy. But I think the policies themselves don't eliminate any Republican from my vantage point.
Yeah, I think the left would accuse the right of having white supremacy be a core tenet. It's clearly not. There are white supremacists within the Republican Party, but it is not in any way a core tenet. And if for some reason in an imaginary world where the Republican Party adopted white supremacy as a core tenet, like a thing that they're advancing, that would disqualify Christians from being able to support it.
Correct.
Yeah, and that's why I feel like that's why I'm not advocating for partisanship. Like I don't advocate for allegiance to a party, period. I advocate for allegiance to Christ, and the way that we play that out may look like voting and supporting for certain candidates that by and large may organize around a certain party. But I think that's a caveat that I am totally willing to make as a believer is I don't believe that we should be partisan in the sense of like, this is where our allegiance lies. First and foremost, it lies to Christ, or goes to Christ. And after that, we make decisions each time based on that particular candidate in that race. Is there a scenario where a Democratic candidate you could vote for? Maybe, but I think the problem with that, even on a local level, the problem with that is that the way that party, with its core tenets, the way that it's defined itself, even if you have a great believer who's the right candidate who aligned himself with that party platform, I think the party platform is just antithetical, too antithetical. And if the Republican platform ever becomes that, then I would be in the same boat with the Republican platform.
100%. 100%.
Okay, so I want to, if we can, guys, let's go back to the clip and let's play the other half of this clip.
But actual data is showing us this, that when political conservatism spreads, more people become Christians. And when political progressivism spreads, less people become Christians. There's a reason for this. The New Testament talks about laws. The book of Galatians talks about laws. It talks about the law as a teacher. What people do not understand is that laws in a nation, they have what Christians have historically called a didactic function. Laws do not simply legislate right and wrong. They teach the populace what's right and wrong. Laws calibrate the consciences of a nation. If you start swimming in the streams of truth and liberty, you're eventually going to find its source. Conservatism in general calibrates the conscience in such a way that it pushes people toward the God from whom the principles came. Progressivism, whether you like it or not, this is just a fact. Progressivism is built generally upon a secular Marxist view of human nature, economics, governance. So what progressivism does, particularly secular progressivism, is it calibrates the consciences of people away from what is true, right, and good, and it teaches people to call evil things good and good things evil. And you can do that with abortion, with gay marriage, with trans stuff, with redistribution of wealth, all the things. Literally all the things.
Reactions.
The first thought that I had about the law calibrating how the public is to think about right and wrong, my brain went to, about the, they're trying to create laws to protect botched abortions. Like basically if someone is accidentally born alive, there needs to be laws that like force that life to be protected and preserved. If we can win that battle and accomplish that, I think it's something like 100. I forget. I looked up the statistic. It's a low number compared to the number of abortions that there are, but it's a significant enough number that essentially there will be people that survive who otherwise would have been aborted, and they will basically be testimonies to this is a human being that. Like what if how is it consistent to think that it's that we must save this life simply because of location?
Sure.
There are two things I think that he nails in this clip that I just think are helpful. He's pushing back on one. There's this old adage. I don't know how old it goes back, but at least for several decades, you can't legislate morality. And in essence, that was an adage, a maxim that came from the left in the mid 20th century. Really with the aim of saying, like, when you pass laws, that can't change anyone's heart. Therefore, you shouldn't try to pass laws that are in line with your Christian morality. That adage, that maxim, was purely a left-wing idea that was aimed at pushing religious people out of the public square. And in some ways, it's been very effective. And I always want to be like, you can't legislate morality. Actually, the only thing you can legislate is morality. Like, what are you talking about? Every law is based on morality. Why is theft illegal? Because we believe stealing from someone else is wrong. Why is rape illegal? Because we believe that violation is wrong. Like every law we have. Why is speeding illegal? Because we believe that being reckless could harm someone else, and we think harming is wrong. That's all moral statements. If we don't believe in morality, then there is no legislation to be had. It's garbage. So like we absolutely can legislate morality. And the second thing he it kind of leads from that, or kind of flows from that, is the idea that when you pass laws, it absolutely impacts how people think about things. And the stats on this are overwhelming. We see this with the civil rights movement. The people who were against it, once it passed, a year later, people were for it. Obamacare in 2008, Obergefell in 2015, slavery in the 19th century. Like the percentage of people, like Abraham Lincoln's popularity was like less than 25%. But over time, because slavery was outlawed, people began to go, oh, maybe it is bad. Like the idea that passing laws doesn't shape people is just, there's no basis. There's no factual basis. It's just some people saying stuff, hoping it will stick. And we should just be sure to make sure we don't let that stick.
I was suckered into that. I used to say you can't legislate morality back when I was more libertarian. And yeah, it's crazy. Then I heard probably somebody from Doug Wilson's camp say for the first time morality is the only thing that you can legislate. And I was like, that is correct. Another big awakening that I had was when you read the Old Testament and you look at what changed nations, like what changed the nation of Israel or changed the nation of Judah in the Old Testament, it was almost never a grassroots revival that sort of swept the country. It was always some combination. It always involved governors like basically saying, we're not going to do this anymore. And making a really strong stand, like kings that would just go and destroy the temples of Baal. The people didn't really like that. And yet it completely changed the trajectory of the nation, at least for the short time of that king's reign.
This is one of the things that just in my doctoral studies, church history, that I came to the realization a couple of years ago. I used to think grassroots is what we want. That's the great. I actually read a book. I can't remember the name of the title. It's bummed I can't remember it. But basically, the book was about the 300 human beings that have actually changed. Like, there's only been 300 humans of the billions and billions of people that have ever lived. Only 300 ever changed the world. And they're all people of immense influence. It's like these grassroots movements start, and they get the attention occasionally of some leader, and the leader makes a call. But the grassroots movement cannot affect change unless a leader who has power chooses to use his power on behalf of that movement. That's it. It's never happened. Peter Leithart wrote a great book a couple years ago. He's a pastor, scholar in our country, called Defending Constantine. And he was basically like, people like dog on Constantine and the religion and the church mix. And he's just like, you guys totally you have no idea the framework Constantine created that has revolutionized the world for the good, like, should be noted, praised, and emulated. It's an excellent read. I'd commend. But he's talking about that. Like, there is no such thing as grassroots movements. It is from the top, and that's what changes things. And over time, it creates the pre-evangelism culture.
Or why do we cringe when something that starts grassroots ends up bubbling up to the top, like in the case of Pete Hegseth? Like that's a case where a grassroots thing essentially helped form a leader that is now sitting at the top and will now make decrees of how things are going to go and what's going to be tolerated and what's not going to be tolerated.
So I want to call out something here in terms of equipping. If you're a believer listening to this and you're like, hey, yeah, some of this stuff, like, it really does make sense. Remember this. The reality of it is morality will be legislated. It will be legislated. The question is, whose morality? What standard are we going to use, right? So I think this is a whole different podcast, what we can do at some point, but there are three religions that are competing for the future of America and the future of our world. Those religions are Islam, progressivism / wokeism / secular humanism, whatever you want to call it. It is a religion. You can find all the similarities for how it's a religion in and of itself, and Christianity. One of those three has produced the most flourishing that humankind has ever experienced, the most flourishing civilization. And so as believers, if we recognize, if we're intellectually honest enough, which again, the left should be intellectually honest enough to admit this as well too, that morality will be legislated. The question is, where's the standard going to come from? And do you believe in an objective truth standard, or one that just goes by whims of what society feels like at the time? Progressivism, aka Marxism, a lot of it's rooted in that. It will be legislated. The question is, where do we want that morality to come from? Where do we want it to be derived from? As Christians, we know that the Bible, God, that is the standard for truth, for goodness, for beauty. Why would we not want that to be the standard that our civilization is structured around? And by the way, that has been the standard our civilization is structured around. And it's why it's the place that everybody wants to be. It's a place that everybody wants to be. And no one wants to leave, by the way. All these people who talk about it, they don't actually want to leave. And it's because this country was founded on those standards, and it's produced so much flourishing. And we're kind of running low on time here, guys. Any last takes? Yeah.
A question that I would just ask for anybody who's like a Christian, but they're like cringing at, how they're basically being forced into a political party if if they're going to be politically active or talk out loud or anything like that. The question that I think is most relevant is, what do you think God wants you to do with the political power that you've been given? It's like you could just choose to not exercise political power, or you could subscribe to ideologies that the world wants you to subscribe to for how, this country's supposed to operate or whatever. But the main question that we should all be asking is, all right, God, for some reason, I have been born into an amount of political power. What do you want me to do with it?
To whom much is given, much is commanded, Jesus said.
Very true. And to that point, the default response from Christians, myself included, I had to repent from this, even though I've been very politically active behind the scenes and in personal relationships and trying to influence people in person, right? The default response for so many of us has been, oh, we're gonna believe it in our hearts. We're gonna try to believe the truth in our hearts, but we're not gonna fight for it. And why are we surprised when we let when we let culture exchange? This is what's happened. We've exchanged truths for lies. Just like in that clip from Josh Howerton, we have called evil good and good evil. Why are we surprised that when we let that happen unopposed, we aren't using our voice, we aren't using our political power, as you were talking about, Timmy? Why are we surprised that darkness has just flooded over our country? Like, we shouldn't be surprised. And so this is empirical, this is anecdotal, and it is spiritual. Like, listen, I love that challenge, Timmy, where God is calling you to more courage. The question is, it's going to look different for each of us. Not all of us are called to get on a loudspeaker on every single issue at all times, but we are called to more courage. So be praying into, how am I called to more courage? How am I called to stand for truth, stand for Christ, oppose evil? What does that look like for me? That's what I would lead you with too.
And it's always going to cost us something. Like, I don't think that I really gain anything as a kids book author to like come on your podcast and air my political views, and now I'm going to be hated by half the people that would hear this. Like, I don't really gain anything from that. But when I ask the question, God, what do you want me to say? He wants me to say the things that he says. And whatever hate comes from that is what comes from it.
There's a cost. And the bigger cost is on your deathbed or at judgment, realizing I abdicated. That's actually the bigger cost. There's a cost either way. And I will take this cost versus that cost. And one more thing that Charlie Kirk actually talked a lot about. Have you heard the 3 to 5% rule, this concept? So the idea is that it takes 3 to, let's say, 5% of a population to actually affect massive change. 3 to 5%. And one of the best, you can see this throughout history, any type of movement that's sprung up, it's usually 3 to 5% that stand up, that are willing to fight for it and lead for it. And the best example is our own nation. So less than 3% of Americans fought against the British and won our independence, right? It took 3% willing to stand up. In today's day and age, we hope that it doesn't come to that where we have to take arms, but there is a very real battle going on. And that battle is not against flesh and blood. It is spiritual, but it requires Christians to be willing to get in that fight, just as it did back in the day against the British. So the question is, are we willing to be one of the 5%? If we are, God can use us, and God will use us.
I think that's great. I think that's a great point. I think the one, as a pastor, the one thing I want to always kind of give people is your paradigm as you're interacting with people. My enemy is not the person, my neighbor who voted Democrat. My enemy is not Hillary Clinton or Kamala Harris or whatever trans activist is, or what's the guy's name? He goes by Leah Thomas, who, whatever. Those individuals are not my enemy. The enemy is the spiritual principality, the demonic forces, Satan and his goon squad, those people who are influencing the human beings. I can interact with the person with kindness and compassion while I viciously, proactively, aggressively confront the lie that they've been told. And separating that in my mind does impact how I interact with people. I can be gentle while I attack an idea proactively.
That's such a good ad.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that so inspired me about Charlie is it was love that compelled him. Love is what compels us to engage. And it's not because, again, we're not hating the person. That's why Trump was so confused about how could he have love and forgiveness for his enemy. And Tucker Carlson said something similar. Like, I have a hate box. We all have a hate box inside of us. But we are driven as Christians. We should be driven by love for those people, even the ones that are espousing this evil ideology. We're fighting against the principalities. We're actually fighting for the person. We're fighting for that person and against the evil.
And Kenny, I just want to say something I admire about you is that you're one of the few pastors that I see that is willing to model what it looks like to engage the culture and receive the hate that comes from it graciously. I don't see that a lot. There's a pastor that I really respect who said something absolutely stupid. He said, pastors don't post, they pray. And the ironic thing about that is this is a Protestant pastor who is not a Catholic because of a Christian who posted rather than simply prayed. And there's no history, there's no church history of Christians who just pray and don't post. Christians have throughout history spoken out against evil, and pastors have modeled it. Pastors have decided, I'm going to be the first one to get hated and persecuted rather than just leave that to my congregation. And that is the thing that results in change. And I just appreciate that, Kenny, you will model that. You will post very graciously, speaking the truth on social media. I see the comments that come from it. I see the way that you engage with those comments, and you're modeling for Christians as a pastor. You're modeling for Christians what cultural engagement should look like for a Christian who's like, I'm going to say the things that God says.
Well, that's very kind. I'm humbled to hear that. Thank you, brother.
Amen. High truth, high grace. That's what you model. That's what we all should model. Appreciate you guys. This was so fun.
Same.
Love it.
If you got value out of this episode, be a river and not a reservoir. Who could you share it with that could also get value from it as well? And if you are looking to lead with clarity and with courage, that's what this show is all about. So make sure you're subscribed. It only takes 5% of us to stand up, to start leading and fighting for the things that we believe in, for truth, for Christ, to see the change that we want to see in the world. I invite you to be a part of that 5%. Thanks for being here. God bless.